Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Just as I have a dream.
A salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela.
And Mrs. Thatcher.
Hello and welcome to Systems Reimagined. Today we're going to be doing an episode surrounding mainly the UK and the US. With the UK, we're going to be focusing primarily on some coronavirus updates and lockdown updates and things along those lines. When it comes to the US, we're going to be focusing on basically the aftermath of the US Capitol incident, also discussing some of the Trump impeachment talk, which is currently going on in the House of Representatives. And then finally, Samuel's going to take us around and do a little bit of a big tech banning discussion and talk a little bit about some UK strikes which are currently going on. With that being said, I believe I'm going to pass on to my brilliant co-host, Rachel Duffy, I believe, for the UK lockdown updates.
Yeah, thank you, Benji. What an introduction. So, the UK are currently in what is being described as the most perilous stage of the pandemic so far. Speaking at a vaccination centre in Bristol today, Boris Johnson has again reminded people of the cornerstone that we're at in fighting the virus and how the next few weeks are really kind of make or break. So we're seeing our worst period of sustained deaths, with another 46,169 new confirmed cases and 32,000 people currently in hospital with the virus. We've also seen reports tonight of some hospitals having to ration oxygen supplies, and also, especially in the south and southeast, temporary morgues and things like that. So it's a really dire situation at the moment. And this comes amongst a message that's been publicised, especially by the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty. Today, the government kind of pushed him out to do the rounds on the BBC and other media platforms, really warning against complacency. A lot of people are used to these measures. We've had them for kind of the thick end of a year now, and people are aware of how to bend the rules without breaking them, how to get away with more things. And so Chris Whitty, along with other kind of key figures in the scientific advisory group, or SAGE, as I'm sure we'll know it better as, have really warned against this kind of complacency that is developing. Police are recording more and more fines and arrests, and people just not going with the advice as much. More cars on the road, more people still working, even if they could possibly work from home. The Chancellor Rishi Sunak has also warned today that the economic situation will get much worse before it gets better, with 800,000 already having lost their jobs, and further redundancies now inevitable. So it's a pretty grave situation at the moment in terms of this pathway to hopefully fighting the virus. On a slightly brighter note, more than 2.6 million doses of the COVID vaccine have been given to nearly 2.3 million people now. Although the Chief Executive of NHS England again today has highlighted how the jab isn't a free pass to ignore measures like social distancing, especially if people have only got the first of the two vaccinations needed, and the fact that the vaccination needs around 2 weeks to be effective. But nevertheless, it's certainly a step in the right direction. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, also appeared on the Andrew Marr show yesterday morning, and he pledged that every over 18 would be vaccinated by the autumn, which is a huge pledge considering that a lot of people aren't really even particularly thinking we're on course to reach that vaccination of the most vulnerable categories and over 80s by February, as Boris is kind of hoping we will to be able to open the economy back up. But Hancock out here, kind of, whether you call it distraction tactics or just kind of blind faith and optimism, saying that all over 18s will have received vaccinations by kind of October time. is certainly interesting, and if it were to happen, then it would be very good with that winter period again coming up this next year, and the NHS that we have seen struggle so much with not only the normal winter periods this year, but an increased kind of strain and pressure through COVID cases. So overall, we like to put somewhat of a positive spin on these stories here, but there's not too much kind of hope today. I think hopefully just as long as people are wearing those masks and really kind of being at home as much as possible, and the government continue the furlough scheme and things for those that can't, I think that's the only thing that can be done now. I know we've spoken in the past about kind of the impact on children, and I'm not sure if Benji wants to mention some of the kind of broadband poverty that has been really prevalent in the news this week. But yeah, I'd say that's a pretty grave but accurate summary of the UK right now.
What I'll just say, well, first of all, I'll just like to say that in a side of me, I understand how people are tired of the lockdowns, and there's a really low morale. I think because of a variety of reasons. I think the government has lost a lot of public support throughout the lockdowns. Just in terms of government confidence, Dominic Cummings obviously being kind of an exemplary case of that. But also the government, since its first lockdown, as we discussed in our first episode, they've seen models of how to really tackle and squash this virus. And Boris Johnson, has opted out of using any of these strategies. And so I can fully understand how some people are going to just be tired of it and wanting to kind of bend the rules, which inevitably will lead to more hospitalizations and more deaths. Of course, I'm not saying that it's a good thing that people are doing that, but in some sense, I understand where these people are coming from. And the whole goal about vaccinating everyone over 18 in such a short time span. The government has had a history throughout this pandemic about promising things and under-delivering. I don't mean to sound like Keir Starmer right now, but it just is true. Like, the 100,000 tests a day during the first wave of this thing was a really good example of that. So, I'm cautiously optimistic. If they do it, I'll be the first one to be like, great, you did a great job. But if they don't, then it's just them again, overpromising and not really delivering any results. So that's all I really have to say on this kind of stuff. And obviously, so many deaths. We reached over 1,300 deaths the other day, which is horrendous numbers. And I believe that's the largest daily deaths increase since the pandemic began, right?
Yeah, it was also like we reached over 1,000 for 4 days in a row consistently.
Yeah, horrendous, right? And so, I will say this as well. I don't know if anyone any of our viewers follow me on Twitter, but all my Twitter predictions in terms of like what's happening with the coronavirus stuff is coming true. So yeah, it's one of my pinned tweets. So be sure to check it out to see what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, I guess I'll pass off to Samuel to see what he thinks.
Yeah, regarding the vaccines, I think, they made so many promises throughout this whole pandemic of reaching certain goals at certain times that they've consistently failed at. So I don't think this one for vaccinating, people under 18 by autumn, I'm very doubtful it's going to happen. So we'll see it. Like, as you said, if they do it, then I'll be the first one to congratulate them for that feat. And yeah, as you echoed as well, I have sympathy for people, because I know it is true that I think people are not following the lockdown measures as much right now as for the first lockdown. But I do have sympathy because this government has consistently U-turned on so many different laws and restrictions. The communication's been all over the place in communicating to the public about the dangers and the certain restrictions for certain tiers, for example. So I don't blame people for being a bit impatient, but obviously with the vaccine rolling out now, I think now is more important than ever to try be disciplined and try maintain, listen to the rules and be cautious. But yeah, there is a sympathy there for sure.
Also, from a financial,
And
I would say from a financial perspective as well, like the government ministers have been speaking a lot about the reason why we're having so many infections and the infections keep on growing and whatever it may be is because people are meeting people outside and not really sticking to the social distancing rules. But I feel like a more reasonable explanation for why the infection rate is increasing is probably because businesses haven't actually closed down, when they needed to, because there's a lack of financial support. I think the financial support given during the first wave of the pandemic has not been mirrored here. I feel like, and so so it's not that people are just seeing too many people outside. It's that people need to try to survive, and these companies are trying to survive, but doesn't have the government support financially to close down and guarantee that they'll stay afloat. So that's also something I want to point out.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really important point that you've picked up on. The inconsistencies between the first and the second lockdown. I know Starmer has come out today and quite publicly addressed this, but things like takeaway coffee shops being open still and nurseries. And again, obviously, on that kind of economic disparity as well, it's so dissimilar in many ways to the first lockdown. And we're seeing far greater increases, far greater positive cases. Whether or not that's because of sort of greater testing capacity now is another thing. But certainly a really grim picture that was certainly mirrored in March, possibly even worse now, and we're not seeing the same action being taken. So I think it's certainly an area for them to look at in terms of just kind of weighing up the similarities between the two and what did work well. We're the first to maybe point out some of the shortcomings because there's so many to pick from, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, some of that economic support was effective. So why is it not being replicated this time around?
yeah, exactly. I mean, going for my walks, like there's like so many offices around, and these jobs are like far from being essential work, and these offices are still open. There's people inside, and once again, I get it because as you said, the financial support hasn't been as comprehensive as the first time around, and also, I mean, for mental health reasons as well, you want to get out and talk to people, your co-workers as well. But still, I mean, surely like there should be some enforcement, especially for these non-essential businesses. And yeah, given the adequate financial support is also vital and it needs to be done. Like, yeah, I don't understand the rationale behind backtracking on the support that we've given to these businesses and individuals. Yeah, I just don't understand. And I mean, for example, like countries like France, I know they're keeping, I think it was an 80% furlough scheme until like
something around that, yeah.
2021, right, or something like that, or like later on in 2021. So yeah, I mean, there really is. It's just the story of the whole lockdown. Just there's no proactiveness in this government. They consistently U-turn, and like, for example, with the schools, like we allowed them to come in for like one day, and then we U-turn that rule because of backlash. I mean,
I think I would also say like this whole idea of like just going back to the it's because of people meeting too much outside instead of businesses not closing. I think it's a way of the government to deflect blame from them. If they can be like, oh, all you guys are just being so irresponsible for, going on too many walks. It's not our fault that we haven't provided financial, support to these businesses. It's just one of the many ways which the government recently has been just trying to deflect blame from themselves and, to the individuals. I mean, same thing I feel like with the teaching unions in a way. The government was like, oh yeah, it's safe to teach in schools. As you said, open for one day. Oh no, we're going to stop that. But then they still try to cover up their tracks by saying, oh no, but it was actually, well, it wasn't that the teaching was unsafe. And it's just inconsistency after inconsistency. And yeah, just a nightmare.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go, Samuel.
Rachel, go for it.
No, I went last time, so I'm going to go for it.
No, yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, we're a bunch of uni students and we did our first episode on like different countries, handling this, and it's, as I said, it's communalities and how that was handled, and yeah, I mean, we can pick this up as uni students who are not involved in the government. Surely the government can, like, use their brain a bit and change their strategy. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been the same story throughout the whole lockdown. So
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, what is next on the list of the topics that we're going to
I
discuss
think
today?
I'll go to some US updates and the Trump impeachment proceedings.
Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, following on from our last episode, we kind of did a deep dive into what was going on. It was just the day after, and there were still a lot of questions being asked. What exactly had happened? How had such a huge security breach been allowed to happen in the US Capitol? And so on and so forth. Well, luckily this evening we have a few more answers to these questions, but a lot is still left up in the air. So tonight, Democrats have charged President Trump with incitement of insurrection as part of the impeachment attempts following last Wednesday's violence in the Capitol. With 5 confirmed deaths, there's an investigation being launched, and Trump is kind of really at the pinnacle of that and is being blamed. He told supporters to fight like hell publicly in attempts to overturn the election of Joe Biden. So in terms of his case for innocence, it's not looking good, but whether the impeachment kind of succeeds remains to be seen, especially with such a short time frame left of his presidency. So these proceedings have also charged Trump to have engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting such violence against the government of the United States, and in so doing, he has violated his oath of office. So he is set to become the first president to have been impeached twice. Again, it remains to be seen whether the second attempt will be successful. And the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has come out and publicly labelled Trump as deranged, unhinged, and a dangerous president amidst mass security increases before next week's inauguration, with many fearing continued violence, especially on such a large and public scene as next week will be. Trump has said that he won't be attending Biden's inauguration, but Mike Pence, I think it remains to be seen, but I think he probably will. Whether that's for his own kind of political advantages of hoping to recover what's left of his image and reputation in bids of going for a presidency himself in the future. But it's certainly taking the kind of spotlight away from Biden and Harris, as would normally they would be kind of in all of the papers and news channels with what the cabinet will look like, what the first days in office will look like, and I'm sure we can go on to discuss those things later, but certainly for the time being, in such a chaotic climate, it's really, really taking a back seat, which could be damaging. Biden has come out and he's not a huge supporter of this impeachment process, favouring instead unity. It's going to be a very long time, longer than 4 years, I think we can all agree, until there's unity seen in America. But certainly it's reassuring to have a president-elect and vice president-elect just peddling a message of some unity after the divisiveness that we've seen, as we were saying last week, not just over the past 4 years, but over many decades. More specifically, in terms of some of the jargon, the resolution tonight has confirmed that the Democrats have invoked this, and it describes how members of the cabinet can agree to remove the president under extreme circumstances. However, Pence, as we said, although keen to kind of salvage what's left of his reputation, has been a staunch Trump loyalist up until the very climax, and I think will continue to do so, and he's certainly signalled that he has no intention of joining in with such a move. And Republicans in the House have duly blocked the Democratic resolution. So it's going to be an incredibly interesting time until Trump officially leaves the White House. He was on what I think is one of his last official engagements today, and there's talk about him going to Scotland to his golf course this next week rather than going to Biden's inauguration. again, with just on a domestic level, UK COVID restrictions, I'm not sure whether he'll actually be allowed into Scotland, but yeah.
Yeah, I heard
Crazy.
Nicola Sturgeon. She came out and said, "Yeah, Trump can't come in
Yeah,
for like to play golf if that's his plan." So I think that plan may have been a bit foiled there.
yeah. I think fair enough. It would be a bit hypocritical if she did let him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's
Um,
all on the US. Really, the dust is settling, but it's still kind of a very contentious time.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say on that, like, as well, the whatever happens with this whole, 25th Amendment versus impeachment kind of debate that's going on, like, I don't think personally that, the 25th Amendment will essentially go through. I don't think Trump will, leave office or be forced to leave office or whatever it may be. And I don't know if that's the right path forward. I think impeaching him, I think he has to face some consequence. I just don't know if using the 25th Amendment is the right way to go about that. And I don't think, realistically speaking, Mike Pence will, invoke it. And I don't think he would get a majority of the cabinet to, to say that Trump's not fit to be the president. Just because, as Rachel was saying, loads of Trump loyalists and things like that. But the impeachment conversation is interesting. I think that he should face some consequence, and I think that could be, a good way to go about it. I don't know what your thoughts about it are, but yeah, that's just for me what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, yeah, one thing whether it's going to be invoked or passed. Another thing is whether it's justifiable. And in my opinion, I think it is because, I mean, some of the, a lot of the people who stormed the Capitol, their intentions were, to cause real harm on people there, the House of Representatives. So, yeah, I mean, action needs to be done, and I agree with you. I don't think the 25th Amendment nor impeachment will work out at the end, and I think he'll end up serving his rest of his term with no action taken, or no serious action taken, I'll say. But yeah, it will be interesting afterwards how Biden will play it. Will he pursue it, or will he stick to this line of unity? So that's what I'm interested in, and I hope. I mean, as I said in the last episode, I think to a certain degree unity is good, but I don't think that's an excuse to be a pushover and let people who invoked this riot and this insurrection get away with it. They need to face their consequences. So yeah, what do you guys think of that? Like, how do you think that's gonna play out?
Yeah, 100%. I think that. Yeah, I think that Biden, he's going to leave it. Because if he wants to try to do this whole shtick about unity or whatever it may be, okay? Sure, fair enough. And I think, as a part of that is that he has to leave, the Trump presidency behind him. I don't think that's right, personally. Like, if he's done something which is wrong and illegal, which he definitely has done, then he should get prosecuted for it. But the precedent, I feel like, presidents being convicted for anything after they leave office, it's just not really existent, right? Like, if you want to speak about people getting convicted after they've been in office, like you should have convicted Obama for war crimes. You should have convicted, Clinton for war crimes. Like so many other presidents have done so many horrible things, and this, Trump no different. And so I just don't think anything will materialize in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think. Certainly as well, Samuel, what you were saying in terms of it's good that Biden's kind of having this narrative of unity, but yeah, it can't mean that he is a pushover. Like he certainly still needs to be forceful on things, and actions speak louder than words as well, in terms of most people will call for unity in the United States, but there's going to need to be some widespread kind of social, economic, political reform for any movement towards unity to be palpable.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add. Sorry, I wanted to add also. I think because from a previous episode, I think the impression I gave on the root causes. I was more referring to the Trump movement as a whole, because I know a lot of the people who stormed the Capitol, a lot of them they're not people who are economically struggling per se. but they, for example, they're privileged enough to fly over there to the capital to protest. A lot of them have small businesses. A lot of PPE funded, for example, like Nancy Pelosi's desk, he received PPP support. But yeah, I mean, as you said, Rachel, it is true. Like the overall, I think you definitely need socio-economical change to kind of address these issues, because I don't think centrism will solve the issue of the far right, and it never has historically, for the most part. So yeah, I agree with you in that sense. And I just wanted to add quickly that also, yeah, I think it's good that the FBI is, they're tracking down the people who are involved in this insurgency, like trying to riot and take over the Capitol. And also, I don't know, are you aware of if there's any investigation being done on the security force there? Because I definitely think there needs to be an investigation on, because how much footage is there of just them letting people go through, So yeah, are you aware of if there's any investigation around them?
As far as I know, personally, no. But also, I haven't been really in the loop recently, so that could be as to why I don't know anything about that.
Yeah,
I definitely should be investigated.
For sure. The investigation that I kind of like briefly mentioned earlier was the same one you've highlighted it better. It was that FBI one looking at the individuals involved, which again, like 100% needs to happen. Those actions can't go without consequences just because they could leave freely at the time. But no, I'm not currently aware of an investigation. I think one is inevitable. You would hope, even just as a result of public pressure and things. But when you see such stark contrasts to Black Lives Matter movements and things like that, and protests, and the armed police that were present there compared to an insurgents here, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I would also just quickly want to go on not a tangent, but I guess, after this whole thing is, said and done or whatever, I think it's important to understand what the future of the Republican Party is right now, because it really is not looking good for them at all, okay? I think the Republican Party has a dilemma between what they want their party message to be. Do they want their party message to be what it was with like the Mitt Romney-esque kind of politicians, where it's like you're really, well put together, classic neoliberal politicians, or do you want to have someone like Ted Cruz, who is a lot more inflammatory, similar to Trump in some ways? And I think what you're seeing here with all the different reactions between, these Republican senators, for example, is just a consequence of this. It's a consequence of the party being fractured. And so this is kind of good news, I would say, in terms of the Democrats and them trying to put, if the Democrats can consolidate as one unit, like one solid party, hopefully around some progressive ideals, they can show what the Republicans actually are like, and really kind of expose them for who they are, as a fractured group of a bunch of people who don't really want anything good for, Americans, I guess. And so I think this whole dynamic going on could really be beneficial for the Democrats if they actually wield it in a proper way. So yeah, I think it's also just something key to point out, because we're seeing really different, reactions from like senators, for example, who are Republicans. So it's good to kind of explore that asymmetry a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think the direction of the party is something that we'll keep coming back to, and how they'll deal with the legacy of Trump. It reminds me in a way, although there's certainly kind of key differences between how the UK Conservative Party had to deal with the legacy of Thatcher, and again how the Labour Party had to deal with the legacy of Blair. And when you have such big political figures, although they may be electorally successful at a point and kind of take the party to power and to recognition and things, the impacts in the long term is something that's not always spoken about at the time, but it always creates a huge kind of power vacuum when they leave, and a power vacuum of ideas and things. Just with those two domestic examples, I think Trump, obviously completely different in just in terms of inciting violence here, Trump, if he hadn't done that, it would have still been a legacy that the Republicans had to deal with. But I think this now, these kind of illegalities are, just a huge issue for them to have to deal with.
Yeah, I think there is kind of a gulf in what the Republican Party itself, like the members of in the government, want the Republican Party to be, which is, I think, more of a Mitt Romney pro-corporate type of party, and what the actual base of the Republican, of the Republican Party wants, because no matter what you say, Trump is still very popular within the Republican base, So I think, as you said, there needs to be a decision on how they want to run the party, because I think they're definitely contrasting and different viewpoints of how that should be in the future moving forward. So it'll be interesting for the next elections to see if it'll be someone more of the fake right populism like the Trump peddles, or will it be more of will they fall back to the more pro-corporate Mitt Romney-esque type of Republican? Because there's definitely conflicting desires in how to move forward. So I think that'll be interesting to monitor. And regarding the Democrats, I think, as you said, it's important to take advantage of this gulf and this difference of opinion within the Republican Party. And I think, Biden has had rhetoric around it. He's saying that, for example, he wants to go on tour with Bernie, and he's praised Bernie and other people of his ilk, So we have to see if he actually acts on that rhetoric, or if it's just going to be more, just trying to rile up the left of the Democratic Party. So we'll have to see. But I hopefully he does, act on that, and because if he successfully manages to pull that off, I think that gives him a big advantage moving forward for the next few elections at least. So there has to be definitely monitored, and I think the Democrats need to seize on this opportunity. But I would say, despite, I think still, Biden has made more of an effort, for example, than Keir Starmer, for example, to bring some form of unity. But still, whether it will be enough is the question. So, it's definitely interesting moments for both parties. And, hopefully the Democrats, they figure it out and there's some form of unity. Should I move on to the tech side of it now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So another big, the results of the insurgency has been the text widespread banning of Trump. Trump has been banned from big social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, all the way to social media companies like Pinterest, which has nothing to do with him, but he's still banned from it. This is interesting. And also, furthermore, this social media company called Parler, which is a social media messaging app, has also officially cut its services off today. And also recently, within the last hour, it filed for antitrust lawsuit against Amazon because the Amazon Web Service that they use to support their services and app stopped supporting them. And also, this is along with Google and Apple removing them from their App Store. So as you can see, there's a widespread clampdown of Trump and far right figures on these social media platforms. And I think there are two aspects to this problem. I think on the one hand, I think it is good that they have banned Trump and others who have incited violence and have peddled dangerous conspiracy theories that have led to violence and threats. So I think on that side, there is justification. And also the fact that these figures are not complying with the terms and conditions of these private companies, this gives them all the right to ban these people. You can argue, in fact, that I think, Trump, it took so long to ban him because he's the president and he wields so much power. You could have argued that he could have been deplatformed from these social media companies way earlier, So I wanted to give you a glimpse because the right-wing people, the right-wing figures and reactionaries, they really feed into their base and coming up with crazy theories and just being reactionary about the whole this whole step taken to ban Trump, and they're really twisting it. So yeah, I wanted to show a video of Charlie Kirk, the good old our favorite Charlie Kirk, the right-wing grifter. He's speaking to Fox about the situation of Trump getting banned on these social media websites. And yeah, just have a look at this video, and then we can comment on it afterwards.
Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Steve Hilton, host of The Next Revolution. And Charlie Kirk, founder and president of Turning Point USA. Good to have all of you with us tonight, gentlemen. Charlie, I want to start with you, and I want to show everyone, because the president doesn't have a Twitter account anymore. Don Jr., his son, does, at least for now. We'll see how long that lasts. But let's take a look at what he tweeted, because I think it's important. He says, so the Ayatollah and numerous other dictatorial regimes can have Twitter accounts with no issue despite threatening genocide to entire countries and killing homosexuals, etc. But the President of the United States should be permanently suspended. Mao would be proud. Charlie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's completely outrageous. It's predictable. Twitter has been kind of building up to this moment for a couple months now. In kind of a ironic turn of events, Twitter shouldn't be banning President Trump. They should be giving him a dividend of the stock. I mean, when Twitter was 4 or 5 years ago, Twitter was $18 a share. It closed at over $50 a share, large in part because President Trump made the platform relevant again. And this is a very, very disturbing turn of events when the current president of the United States, as we are talking right now, is restricted from communicating to 88 million people. Some could argue could potentially be a national security risk. But even beyond this, this is something that the left has wanted to do for quite some time. They are using the events that no one is supporting in any form whatsoever from a couple days ago as an excuse for a massive censorship campaign that I'm afraid is not going to stop. I'm currently up on Twitter right now. I hope to continue to be, but this seems to now be a out-of-control pattern from the masters of Menlo Park that want to silence disagreement, and they got the big one.
So yeah, I mean, as you can see with this video, like from these weird comparisons, you know, comparing this to what Mao would have done in China, you know, or, you know, saying that Trump should have a share in Twitter for growing his popularity, all these crazy things. It's, yeah, as I said, it's just feeding the base. And I think there's a few things to address. I think it's firstly to say that he's been cut off of communicating. I think it's fake, you know, because, you know, Trump could easily reach out to people on Fox News or, you know, the One American News Network, like, which are quite big platforms, with Fox News being the biggest news network in America. You can easily reach out to them and communicate his message to his audience and reach out to millions of people. But to say that he's been you know, censored is nonsense, because he can express relay his message to the world. So I think first of all, that's an absurd and reactionary claim from these figures, these right-wing figures. And also, secondly, I want to address the claim that there's a leftist plot from big tech and news to silence conservatives, which I just think is a big farce, you know. First of all, none of the bosses of these companies are left-wing at all. And also, you know, like the biggest news networks in America, which is Fox News, and the most watched videos on Facebook, and even like radio shows, all of these are the major lean towards the right wing. Like, you know, like, for example, like the biggest talk show radios online, it's like 12 out of the 15 of these are right wing. As I said, the most watched videos on Facebook are right wing.
Also, Ben Shapiro, who is like the most viewed person, like his videos are the most viewed videos on Facebook almost every single day. Like, the idea that right wing people are getting canceled off these social media platforms is just literally fiction.
Yeah, it's fiction. I mean, they like to complain about the left's victim complex, but they have even more of a victim complex. But I also wanted to like look at the bigger picture as well, because it is the conservative ideology of like deregulation and tax breaks, especially starting from the 80s, which allowed media to grow and be able to monopolize and gain power to what we see now. Which is a monopoly in tech, and then having such vast power and influence in our society. And yeah, this is just the outcome of their project, their ideology. And now they want to turn it on the left and claim that it's a left-wing project to censor the right wing, which is their issues that in the first place, they're the ones that let it grow in the first place with their deregulation policies. And it was the left initially that warned of the possibilities of having monopolies and vast power. So yeah, it's very twisted, and it just shows their reactionary thinking around this, and just to feed the base and try to create more drama, which is, it's a bit ridiculous. And I want to also get into the other side of this problem, as I said, mentioned earlier, which is the concentration of power in tech and media in general. Because despite the actions taken with Trump and other far-right figures, I think we do need to rethink the structures of tech and try to rein in their power. We can look at some statistics, for example. Like, for example, Google controls more than 87% share of the US search market, and its parent company, Alphabet, is now one of the most valuable companies in history. Sorry. You can also look at the big five companies, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And they represent more than the 20% of the market cap of the S&P 500. So yeah, you can see that is a real monopolization, and you can say there's a select few companies that are running the market basically. There is action being taken. For example, the U.S. is preparing antitrust lawsuits. But I think there are a lot of doubts around the lawsuit itself and the long-term effects of antitrust laws in general throughout history, because we've seen capital adjust very quickly to these antitrust laws. So there is a lot of doubt in antitrust laws. And then also the Trump administration wants to change the current Section 230 law, which basically allows companies to moderate their platforms without legal liability. But I think these two actions taken doesn't go far enough and doesn't address the real issues within tech. I think we need to, think about tech overall, like how we can, for example, change ownership and the structure of tech to a more democratic way of working. I think, for example, we need to look at certain aspects like data and try to transform that, how we can transform that into more of a public utility and a commons. We also need to look at, I think, like global multi-stakeholder governance, because there's a lot of talk about nationalizing, from the left, especially about nationalizing these platforms. But I don't think this is possible now, because there are global companies and it needs to be addressed globally. So we need to rethink and reimagine how we use tech. So in a global manner, and how we can globally and democratically run these companies. So yeah, what do you think of this whole situation? Sorry I went on a bit of a rant there, but I think this does give us an opportunity to look deeper into how tech is run and how much power it wields, and how we can, think further and how we can address these issues.
Yeah, I'll just say with some of these more right-wing YouTubers, Tim Pool, Goat, and people like Dave Rubin, and all these folk, it's like they love to, they're like, yeah, man, I'm a free. They're a very proud free marketer, They're like, I love the free market, it solves every problem, all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, man, you can stick to that line of reasoning with however much you want, okay? But then just don't try to deny the evidence that free markets can inevitably lead to monopolies, right? It's just something which can happen. And so it's like the right wing, and they're like, oh, fine. I don't know if I can paint a brush over the whole of the right by saying this, because there probably are some more nuanced opinions in this. I'll just say the YouTube right. The YouTube right is they want to have this free market ideology. It builds up to a monopoly. Then this company is like, okay, I don't want someone to incite a riot in my on my platform. So what I'm going to do is I'll ban them, because that's obviously not a good thing, inciting a riot in real life and having 5 people die, right? But then they're like, oh no, these tech companies are too big, and then cry free speech. No, if also from their own perspective, a private company can do whatever they want, right? It's what their whole reasoning is. It's like, oh, private companies, they can move their factories wherever they want, without consulting any of the workers. They can set their own rules and regulations because it's their own platform, right? Well, it seems like that's an awfully convenient rule to have when it isn't affecting you directly or people who you support. That's what I'll say on that manner. Second thing I'll say, whether I support him getting banned, I guess a side of me does, and I'm like, yes, he definitely deserves to get banned, because I have a slight feeling that him getting banned on Twitter and all these other platforms is the only real form of punishment that Trump's actually going to get from this whole charade. But it does have a hidden consequence, I would say, in terms of what that can mean for political figures on the other side of the aisle, right? Like, obviously, the thing is, even if some like communist on the left was trying to incite violence and try to gear up supporters to try shoot Nancy Pelosi, for example, as what Trump and his supporters were trying to do, essentially, or like hang Mike Pence, I'd be like, yeah, he deserves to be, he or she deserves to be, banned from the platform, right? But whether this now allows Twitter to kind of diverge off that, I mean, I don't know. We're gonna have to see how it plays out in the next coming months, but I think you have to be Twitter and Facebook and all these other companies have to be really strict on it and be like, okay, we're only going to ban people if they are literally breaking, all they can literally point to a section of the terms and services, agreement, and can say, look, you obviously broke this rule, which I think is definitely true when it comes to Trump. But whether that would be true with kind of other figures, I don't know. So yeah, that's all I have to say on it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really, really key point in terms of how to avoid some of this debate about kind of like banning free speech and things, that these companies have a really consistent just breakdown of everything, not everything you can and can't say, but in principle, the community guidelines that they keep drawing attention to. What do these actually mean in practice, and how are they going to be effective, and how are they going to be enforced? Because I was reading this story about a man who set up a Twitter account and literally copied and pasted everything that Trump tweeted and tweeted himself, and he was banned within like a week. And it's taken them 4 years of the presidency, and I dread to even think how many years Trump was tweeting before then, to ban him. Of course, you can say, oh, well, there was this like incitement of violence. That is a clear breach. But I'm sorry, he has said many, many questionable things before this, maybe not to the same extent. But if they're banning other accounts that aren't the president's for saying the same things, then I think a really kind of clear rule book of regulations needs to be enforced, and how they're going to consistently kind of bring that into practice amongst users. There's something to be said, I would say, for the fact that Trump has been banned from all of these platforms at the same time. I wouldn't say it's entirely coincidental of what happened on Capitol Hill in any way. I think a lot of this is kind of big tech. Trump himself has been incredibly critical of like banning TikTok and things, and how the tables have now turned and they've banned him before he had the opportunity. Pinterest, as you were saying, like social medias that he probably wouldn't really necessarily be using. Like, you can't see him making mood boards in retirement, but equally there's this kind of like united effort to silence a lot of what he's saying. But in terms of silencing like the right wing, and of course we do have to address like there is nuance within the right, maybe not on kind of particular YouTube channels, but like a lot of commentators are making kind of good valid points. But that niche that really get a lot of the airtime, they're in no way being silenced. As you were saying, like Ben Shapiro and things, some of the most watched people. So it is really folly to just come in and say that these people are not having a voice and they're being deplatformed and things, when that's just not the case. And even the ability to kind of cry so loudly about being deplatformed is just counterintuitive, and it's hypocrisy at its finest to say that when they're saying it to such a public audience. So It makes no sense, but I think it's certainly interesting to look at the direction of big tech and how they can kind of use their platform for good and for change, and for these kind of extremist views, removing them, and also how that needs to be consistent and something that's kind of constantly under review, because social media is so different, not only to what it was 5 years ago, but to what it was a year ago with these new platforms, with the growth of TikTok and things, alongside more right wing things like Parler that we've discussed.
My rule is always, if you can hear someone crying about being canceled, they're not actually canceled. That's my take on it. As a general rule, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean Parler as well though. Like Parler is now seen to be the new alternative to Twitter or whatever. Um, and like the reason why Amazon removed Parler from their removed Parler was, yeah, because they're it's because they're planning like another a couple of violent riots on there. Like that's why. It's like there's nuance in these things, right? Like, of course, like if Amazon or Google Play Store, whatever it may be, removed Parler just straight up because they're just for no reason, then I'd be like, yeah, that's a little bit sus, right? But if people are planning riots on your app and you're not doing anything about it, then of course Google's gonna be like, you know what, man, I want to make some money for my shareholders and things, whatever it may be. I don't know if that's gonna really react well in the stock market, so I'm gonna take you off. It's like I feel like it's capitalist logic in some sense. It just if you want to make money, this stuff it makes sense, right? It would make sense from the company's perspective to do this. I'm not saying I agree with it because I don't, but that's just the reality, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no coincidence that. Sorry, go Rachel.
I was just going to say really quickly, in terms of that, the ironic thing is that like Parler has never been able to break through the mold. Like in all the time it's been around, it's been trying to be on that kind of same platform as Twitter and things, and it's just not been seen as a viable alternative. So like personally, I'd never heard of it until this story. But now when it gets this huge amount of airtime, it's because it's been banned. And again, just on the kind of really, really vile messages that were seen on this app, it goes back to our earlier point about the mass security that is needed for next week's inauguration, and the fact that they were targeting this, like a huge public ceremony, and they were planning really, really violent attacks on it. So yeah, I think it's completely legitimate.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely no coincidence. I think that big tech, they all banned him at the same time. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Benj, about the possibility of this flipping on his head and targeting people who challenge the status quo, like from the left, for example. I do think that it is an issue, but as I said, I think this just goes back to the power that big tech has. I think we need to think of ways to create a more democratic space and a space for more like a commons or a public utility aspect to this to tech. So, and I think from there, like it can be there's not as much power in the decision making. So yeah, I think that's the main issue. Like beyond antitrust laws and the Section 230 or whatever, I think there needs to be a real think about how to restructure these companies and this industry in general. And yeah, I mean, that I'm quite when it comes to free speech, I'm pretty more or less an absolutist. I don't take it lightly banning people, but I do think in this case, when it comes to threatening people, I don't think there's any excuse to keep them on the platform, But yeah, as you said, like to avoid a slippery slope, I think there needs to be a real think about big tech and how to restructure it in order to avoid these issues in the future.
Or if there's just like really stringent guidelines, I feel, I mean, yeah, because that's my thing, like what if someone's running on a platform, for example, in the US of saying, okay, I want to break up big tech. It's like my main policy goal. And then, you get a censorship from big tech, or not censorship, that's the wrong word. You have your Twitter account banned or whatever it may be. I don't think that would actually be something that happens like per se, but just it's a possibility that we have to consider and prepare for, I would say. But at the same time, like, I think it's just a possibility we have to prepare for. I think right now, if Twitter and all these other companies just stick to being like, okay, like, you incited violence, you violated this guideline really obviously and stuff like that, then everything should be okay in the long run, I would say.
Yeah. Should I go on to the next story? Because it kind of falls into this what we've been talking about now about tech, big tech, and its challenging its structures and its functions. So Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, they recently formed a union within the company, and this is off the back of multiple walkouts in protest of certain things. For example, the workers protested Google helping the Pentagon in when it comes to the drone strikes, for example. There's a recent walkout for that. And there's been multiple other issues that there's been walkouts and protests. So they've recently formed the union, and I think it's an important issue, and I think it's definitely necessary because, especially in the tech world, it's so like when it comes to like regulation or like workers' rights or unionizing, it's so like it's not that popular there, and it's not present in many of the companies in that industry. So I think this is a good first step to fighting back on the working conditions of the tech, because as we know, as we've covered, like tech is the main driver of the gig economy and independent contractors and just more precarious working conditions. So having a union there, especially in Google's parent company, which is a huge company, it's definitely, hopefully they can wield this power to create better working conditions. I read on their website that they not only covering and helping full-time employees, but they're also helping the independent contractors who work for Alphabet or the vendors who work for them. So it's quite a holistic they've really taken into account all the different workers within these companies and not just focusing on the full-time employees. So I think it's a good first step, and hopefully there is a more of a urgency towards unionizing and fighting for more stable and better working conditions in these tech companies, because it's definitely needed. So I think it's a positive direction, and I think it's a more of a lighter note, within the tech industry from what we discussed today. So I think it's a positive development.
Yeah, no, I'd say definitely. I think also just in general, there's a bit of a trend between a lot of these more private companies and them not really allowing workers to unionize or spying on workers if they're planning on unionizing, as we see with Amazon as a striking example. And the fact is, like, I'll just take Amazon. I'm sure you know much more about Google, Samuel. But with Amazon, their workers have been spied on if they try to unionize. And this is also following, workers having horrendous working conditions, such as not being able to have a break, having to pee in bottles, because if they go on a break, then they're not being as productive in terms of stacking like delivery trucks with packages and things like that to deliver to Amazon customers. And all this is kind of at the center of really not unionizing and really bargaining about your working conditions, right? So we've spoken before about the relationship between capital and workers' rights. But yeah, just in my view, real quick to sum up, I just think that they're not really compatible with one another. In these companies, they want to maximize profit, they want to maximize, utility, and that's just completely juxtaposed to what the idea of a union is, because a union will want to fight for things like shorter working days, which a company will obviously not want to fight for, would not want, and things like that. So, I would, just on my side, definitely good news. And yeah, more power to the unions if they can organize and effectively, bargain for good working conditions for people.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't have a huge amount to add, just kind of echoing what you all both said on that. Obviously, those work conditions, are not suitable at all. So if a union is going to be effective in kind of bargaining for better working conditions and pay and just kind of fairer treatment, then 100%, I think it will be interesting to see how that works in practice.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to another story on unions. this week the British Gas is striking, and this has to do with the news that CENSORSHIP, which is the owner of the British Gas, they basically the scheme is called it's the fire and rehire scheme, and this basically this new scheme will basically affect working conditions and pay within the British Gas. And yeah, this is the first strike in a decade, actually, so it's quite significant. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, and I think it's pretty interesting because I think this coronavirus and the economic consequences of this will lead to more striking and more efforts to unionize to fight for the workers. I'm not sure. Was it the case that, for example, like were there teachers' unions striking today, Bench? Because I saw you on social media about that.
I think it was for NHS workers. They were 14 unions were demanding a pay rise for the NHS, which, I mean, considering they're literally being worked to death right now, yeah, I would support that definitely. But yeah, that's just that on that note.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think I want to add that quick segment because I think it's also a good development, and it's a big step to take. And yeah, I just wonder. I mean, on the bigger question of public utilities, I wonder how, because we've seen throughout this, this coronavirus, the power of the government to provide certain things to the public. I wonder if, this attitude, I wonder if the public expect more of the government to provide certain basics. So I wonder, if there's going to be, in the next few years, a shift towards public utilities. Like, for example, we're having the broadband discussion right now. Like, I wonder if the tide is going to turn for the government to provide certain things, as a public good. So yeah, what do you think of that? Like, do you think there's going to be a shift? Because I think that definitely, I think there's a bubble that has been burst in people's minds about the limitations of government, because they've seen how much they've provided. So yeah, I wonder, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely going to be more of an expectation for the government to kind of plug some of these gaps in funding, and a much larger state, which goes against what the kind of Conservative Party are desiring in terms of that kind of traditional small state nature. But if there's one thing they are, it's pragmatic. So I think we'll certainly see adapting times to that. Labour as well, I think it will be so interesting at the next general election and even the local council elections, which are supposed to go ahead over the summer, may now be delayed with COVID, how Labour will fare, being more traditionally kind of big state, big society, and plugging those funding gaps. I think a lot of people as well, generationally a lot of people will kind of grow up and go through their early 20s now with the government being a much bigger kind of figure in their lives than we would have seen 20, 30, 40 years ago, in terms of paying furlough wages, in terms of just kind of general support and things. Even if we say they're not doing as much as they should, there is certainly an increase from what there would have been in normal times. How that will be plugged, whether it's through kind of austerity measures, is something that will only become kind of apparent further down the line. But I think it's really interesting. Just quickly as well, to go back on that British gas strike, I think it's a really interesting strike. As you were saying, the union haven't kind of seen this industrial action for a number of years, and they've said, the GMB it is that's responsible, they've said that their members have been provoked, that they see no other kind of suitable course of action for this, which is why they've been out today across, I think it was Chrysler's Corner, and local MPs have actually come out in support for the strike, and it involves a lot of workers, key in winter and key in the COVID pandemic especially. I think I saw 4,500 service and repair gas engineers. There's 600 central heating installers, electrical engineers, specialist business gas engineers. It's huge, and it's company-wide on all levels of pay and of kind of professionalism. So I think that it will be interesting to see how this particular strike runs its course. And yeah, it certainly won't be the last, whether there's that kind of bigger government state or not. It's certainly going to clash with unions.
Yeah.
I just quickly want to add just a comment about Keir Starmer a little bit. He was really late to come out and support the NEU. However, he's been quick to come out now to support this strike, which I think is a good development. And I really wonder if, this has come as a consequence of people putting pressure on him, essentially, about not coming out in support of the NEU originally. So I think that's an interesting conversation to have there in terms of, because, at least the picture that the left has seen in terms of Keir Starmer's leadership, it was promised to be a very left-wing, in terms of policy and stuff like that, in terms of support. And, in many ways, he's failed to deliver on that completely. And so it's interesting to see if any pressure has resulted in him coming out in support of this or if not. So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't doubt they probably because, as we've seen from Keir Starmer, he's, it seems to see that he lacks his own ideology. So yeah, I think I can imagine public pressure did force him to more quickly support this British gas strike. But yeah, as you said, I think he kind of promised to be the middle of Blairism and Corbynism, to find the center, and be a leftist, but not so left as Jeremy Corbyn. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how he, moving forward, if there are more strikes, to see if he will support them. But yeah, I think, as Rachel said, pointing out the different areas in the company that are supporting the strike, it's a good example of solidarity across the different job roles and sectors and levels in the company. So I think I owe my support to them, and hopefully, I think these workers, especially in the public utilities and something so important as gas, I think they have a more of a sense of importance, because as we've seen, these jobs are important for the functioning of the economy. So hopefully this provides a better, a more sense of fighting for better conditions and better pay. So yeah, hopefully this develops in a positive manner, moving forward, and yeah, all my support to it.
Yeah, I will also say we haven't spoken about the whole broadband communism conversation that's been had around the country recently, but that may be something for a separate episode, because I think it's really important to really focus on the media portrayal of when it was coming from a labor manifesto as opposed to coming as more of a mainstream idea now, and just the broader conversation of labor policies from the manifesto being reused in some sense by the conservatives in certain ways and stuff like that. And I think it's just although we haven't discussed it, we definitely will at some point. So brace yourselves for that.
Throughout this whole pandemic, I think there's this meme going around on Twitter, and it's a photo of Jeremy Corbyn being held back by someone, and it's leave it, Jezza, it's not worth it. And this is this is in response to so many of the policies that we now consider and that was part of his manifesto as the labor leader. So there's a constant that meme keeps on popping up on my timeline when it comes to certain policies that the Tory government is now considering to fight this pandemic. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think the topic of broadband will definitely be an interesting topic to discuss on another episode.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have anything else to discuss? I don't believe so. Right? No?
No.
Perfection. Well, that's Systems Reimagined, episode 3 completed. And yeah, as always, like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoy our content and what we do over here. Really helps us grow and things like that. So yeah, just again, thank you to Rachel and Simon for joining me today, and we'll see you guys.
You can find our social medias in the description box.
Yes. How could I forget?
We also got over 100 followers on our Instagram, and thank you for that. And we're also gonna, I think we're gonna announce on our social media about coming up with SR clips where we will be putting these longer these longer podcasts into bite sizes and focusing on the specific topic. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing, you can click on a shorter video where you can look at one particular topic if you want. So yeah, that should be done, I think, for this episode or for the next one. So yeah, look out for that.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you guys. See everyone very, very soon. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.